Adrian Valenti dropped a black folder onto the Moretti kitchen table and let the silence do the threatening. "Your father signed his life away," he said, his voice flat as ice. "Now I'm here to collect. And there's only one thing in this house I actually want." His eyes moved to Elena. 25 years old, a florist who had never harmed a soul, and the most feared mafia boss in New York, was looking at her like she already belonged to him. What she did not know, what nobody knew, was that this man had loved her in silence for years. Before we begin, subscribe to the channel, follow this story all the way to the end, and comment the city you're watching from so I can see how far my story has traveled. The knock came at 7 in the evening, 3 slow strikes against the door, and Elena Moretti knew before she opened it that whoever stood on the other side had not come to bring good news. Her father was already on his feet. Giovanni Moretti had aged 10 years in the last 2 weeks. His hands shook when he reached for the doorknob, and Elena caught his wrist before he could turn it. "Papa, wait. Who is it?" "Go to your room, Elena." "No, not until you tell me what's happening." Her mother stood in the corner of the kitchen, with a dish towel pressed to her mouth, and that alone told Elena more than any answer could have. Rosa Moretti did not frighten easily. She had buried 2 brothers and survived a war in her own country before she ever set foot in America. But right now, she looked at the front door as if death itself were standing behind it. "Elena," her father said again, and this time his voice broke. "Please, for once in your life, listen to me." She did not listen. She never had. She reached past him and opened the door herself. 3 men filled the doorway. 2 of them were built like walls, faces blank, hands folded in front of them. But it was the man in the center who made the air leave the room. He wore a dark coat that probably cost more than her father's entire business, and he did not smile, and he did not blink, and his eyes went straight to Giovanni, as if Elena were not even there. "Mr. Moretti," the man said, "you didn't return my calls." Giovanni's mouth opened, and nothing came out. "Who are you?" Elena demanded. The man finally looked at her. It lasted only a second, but something flickered behind his expression, something she was too angry to notice. Then it was gone, buried under a coldness so complete that she felt it in her spine. "My name is Adrian Valenti," he said. "Your father knows exactly who I am. Don't you, Giovanni?" Her father sank into a kitchen chair like his legs had stopped working. "Please," he whispered, "not in front of my family." "You should have thought of your family before you borrowed money you couldn't repay." Elena's heart was pounding now. She had heard the name Valenti before. Everyone in the city had. People said it in low voices, the way they talked about car accidents and cancer. The Valenti family controlled things no one was supposed to talk about. And the man at the top, the one everyone feared, the one they said had no heart at all, was standing in her mother's kitchen looking at her father like a butcher looks at meat. "How much does he owe you?" Elena asked. "Elena, stop," her father begged. "How much?" Adrian tilted his head slightly. $1.2 million, he said. "Plus interest, which grows every day your father pretends I don't exist." The number hit her like a slap. She actually stepped back. "That's impossible," she said. "My father owns a flower supply business. He doesn't have that kind of money. He never had that kind of money." Which is exactly the problem. Then why would you lend it to him? For the first time, Adrian's men shifted, glancing at their boss. It was a small thing, but Elena caught it. She had spent her whole life reading people. It was the only thing florists and children of immigrants had in common. They both learned early how to notice the things nobody said out loud. "Ask him," Adrian said quietly. She turned to her father. "Papa, what did you do?" Giovanni Moretti covered his face with both hands. And then, in a voice she barely recognized, he told her. He told her about the bad season, about the suppliers who stopped extending credit, about the loan he took to keep the business afloat. A small loan at first, from a man who seemed reasonable. He told her how that loan grew, how the reasonable man disappeared and was replaced by others. How he signed papers he did not fully read because he was drowning, and a drowning man grabs anything. "I did it for us," he said. "I did it so we wouldn't lose everything. I thought I could pay it back before anyone noticed." "Before anyone noticed," Elena repeated. She felt sick. "Papa, this is not a bank. This is the Valenti family. You borrowed money from these people." "I didn't know at first. I swear to you I didn't know." Adrian spoke from the doorway. "It doesn't matter what he knew. The debt is real. The signatures are real. And I am here." Elena spun back to face him. Fear had left her body somewhere in the last minute, and what replaced it was pure fury. "So what happens now?" she said. "You break his legs, you burn the shop, you take the house. Is that how this works?" "Elena," her mother gasped. But Adrian did not react to the insult. He simply watched her, the way a man watches a fire he did not expect to be interesting. "No," he said. "I don't want your house. It's worth almost nothing. And breaking a man who already has nothing is a waste of my time." "Then what do you want?" The room went still. Adrian stepped inside without being invited. His men stayed at the door. He walked past Elena, past her weeping father, and stopped by the small kitchen window where Rosa kept a row of potted herbs on the sill. He touched one of the leaves almost gently, and Elena had the strange thought that a man like him should not know how to touch anything gently. "Your father cannot pay me," Adrian said, still looking at the plants. "We all know this. He will never have $1.2 million. He will die owing me, and when he dies, the debt does not disappear. It passes to his family, to his wife, to his daughter." Rosa made a small broken sound. "So," Adrian continued, turning around, "I am offering a solution, one that lets everyone in this room keep breathing." "Say it," Elena said. His eyes locked onto hers, and what he said next she would replay in her mind 1,000 times in the months to come, trying to understand the man who had said it. "Marry me," Adrian said, "and the debt disappears. All of it. Tonight." For a moment nobody moved. Elena was certain she had misheard. "What did you just say?" "You heard me. You want me to marry you?" "Yes," she laughed. It came out ugly and disbelieving. "You're insane. You come into my house, you tell me my father owes you more than we could earn in 3 lifetimes, and now you want to what? Buy me, like I'm part of the payment plan. Call it whatever you want. You don't even know me." Something crossed his face again, that same flicker she had seen at the door there and gone. "That's not your concern," he said. "It absolutely is my concern. You're asking me to give you the rest of my life. I'm offering you your family's survival in exchange for a signature and a ring. Most people in your position would take it before I finish the sentence." "Then most people are cowards." Her father stood up. "Elena, please don't provoke him." But Elena could not stop. Her whole body was shaking with something she could not name. "Why me?" she said. "That's what I want to know. There are 1,000 women in this city who would marry a man like you just for the money. Women who know what you are and don't care. So why come here? Why us? Why me?" Adrian was silent for a long moment, and then he said something that did not answer her question at all. "You have until midnight to decide. If you say no, I collect the debt the only way that's left. Your father's shop, his savings, his name. Then I come back next year and collect from you anyway, because that is how debt works. You can lose everything and still say no. That is your right." He walked toward the door. "Or you can save all of it tonight with one word." "That's not a choice," Elena said. "That's a threat wearing a suit." He paused at the threshold. For half a second, she thought she saw the corner of his mouth move, almost like the ghost of something that might have become a smile in another man's face. "You're not wrong," he said. And then he was gone. The moment the door closed, the kitchen erupted. Her father was apologizing, sobbing, saying her name over and over. Her mother had collapsed into a chair, and Elena stood in the middle of it, 25 years old, her whole future hanging off a single word, feeling like the floor had opened beneath her feet. You cannot do this, Rosa said, grabbing her daughter's hands. You cannot marry that man. Do you know what he is? Do you know the things they say about him? I know exactly what he is, Mama. Then you cannot. And if I don't? Elena pulled her hands free. Then what? We lose the shop. We lose this house. And Papa still owes him, and then it comes to me anyway. He said it himself. There's no version of this where I walk away clean. There never was. The moment Papa signed those papers, this was always going to end with one of us paying. Her father made a sound like a wounded animal. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry, Elena. This is my fault. This is all my fault. She looked at him then, really looked at him. This man who had carried her on his shoulders when she was small, who had worked 18-hour days so she could go to school, who had cried at her graduation because no one in his family had ever finished school before. He was not a criminal. He was not reckless. He was just a tired old man who had made a desperate choice because the world had backed him into a corner, and now that choice was going to devour his entire family. Unless she stopped it. It's not your fault, she said softly. You did what you thought you had to do. Now I'll do what I have to do. No, Rosa said. No, I forbid it. You can't forbid it, Mama. I'm not a child. Elena, listen to me. A man like that does not want a wife. He wants a possession. He wants something he can own and control and throw away when he's finished. You will not be his wife. You will be his prisoner. Elena had no answer for that because in her heart she believed it too. She thought about all the things she was giving up. The little apartment she had been saving for. The flower shop she had dreamed of opening her own shop, not her father's, with big windows and buckets of peonies and a bell over the door. She thought about the man she might have met someday, some ordinary decent man who would have loved her for nothing more than who she was. All of it gone, traded away to a stranger with cold eyes and a bank account built on other people's fear. But she also thought about her father's face if the men came back. She thought about her mother alone in an empty house. She thought about the word survival and how ugly and small it sounded, and how it was the only word that mattered now. At 11:40 that night, Elena took out her phone. There was a number on the black folder Adrian had left behind. She dialed it with steady hands, which surprised her because the rest of her was anything but steady. He answered on the first ring. Yes. It's Elena Moretti. I know. Of course he knew. She swallowed. I'll do it, she said. I'll marry you. But I want it in writing. Every word. The debt is gone completely tonight, and my father is never touched again. Not by you. Not by anyone who works for you. Not ever. If that happens, I'm yours. The word tasted like poison. But understand something, Mr. Valenti. You can buy my signature. You can buy my name. You will never buy the rest of me. I will marry you, but I will never love you. Not tomorrow, not in 10 years, not ever. You will have a wife who despises you every single day. That is what your money is buying. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. And when Adrian finally spoke, his voice was different than it had been in the kitchen. Quieter. Almost tired. I understand, he said. Do you? Better than you think. She frowned at the phone. What does that mean? It means the papers will be ready in the morning, he said. Your father's debt will be cleared before you finish your coffee, and you will never have to see me more than you can stand. That's it? That's your response to being told your wife will hate you. What did you expect me to say? I don't know. Something. Anything. A normal man would at least argue. I'm not a normal man, Adrian said. You made that very clear an hour ago. And then the line went dead. Elena stood in her dark bedroom, staring at the phone in her hand, and for reasons she could not explain, she felt more unsettled by that phone call than by anything else that had happened all night. She had expected cruelty. She had expected a cold man to answer coldness with coldness. Instead, there had been something underneath his voice she could not name. Something that almost sounded like sadness. Something that almost sounded like a man who had heard the words, I will never love you, and had already made peace with them a long time ago. She told herself she was imagining it. Men like Adrian Valenti did not feel sadness. They did not feel anything. That was the whole point of them. She went to sleep believing that. She was wrong about almost everything. The wedding was set for 11 days later. In that time, Elena learned exactly how much of her life she no longer controlled. She learned it the way you learn about the weather all at once, and without any say in the matter. The debt vanished just as he promised. Her father received a certified letter marking the loan as paid in full, and when Giovanni called the number to confirm it was real, a polite woman assured him that the Moretti family had no outstanding obligations of any kind. He wept at the kitchen table for an hour. Rosa held him and did not say a word. Then came the rest. A woman named Claudia arrived at the house the next morning, introduced herself as Adrian's personal assistant, and informed Elena that arrangements had been made. A dress would be provided. A car would come. Papers would be signed at a private ceremony with a judge, not a church, because Mr. Valenti did not want a spectacle. He doesn't want a spectacle, Elena repeated. How considerate of him. Claudia, to her credit, did not flinch. He asked me to tell you that any part of the arrangement can be changed to your preference. The dress, the ceremony, the location. He said, and these are his words, that you should not have to compromise on the small things when you've already been forced to compromise on the large ones. Elena stared at her. He said that, word for word. She did not know what to do with that, so she did what she always did with things she could not understand. She got angry. Tell Mr. Valenti, she said, that I don't need his permission to choose my own dress, and tell him I'll wear black. It's a funeral after all. Claudia's expression did not change. I'll pass that along. She did pass it along. And 2 days later, a garment box arrived at the Moretti home. Inside was a dress exactly as promised. It was black. Not the black of mourning, but a deep, elegant black, tasteful and beautiful, clearly expensive. There was a small card tucked into the folds. It said only, for the funeral. I hope the flowers are at least to your liking. Elena did not understand the note until she opened the second box. It was full of flowers. Not roses, not lilies, not the obvious expensive things a rich man might send to impress a woman. It was full of ranunculus and sweet peas and garden roses in soft antique colors, and a single stem of something rare that she had only ever seen in one book in her entire life. A flower she had once mentioned loving to a customer at her father's shop on an ordinary afternoon years ago, to a stranger whose face she could not remember. She sat down on the floor of her bedroom, surrounded by flowers she loved, and had never told a living soul about, sent by a man she had known for 11 days, and for the first time since Adrian Valenti walked into her kitchen. Elena Moretti felt something other than anger. She felt afraid. But not the way she had been afraid before. She felt afraid the way a person feels when the story they've been telling themselves suddenly stops making sense. How did he know? She whispered to the empty room. There was no one to answer her. The morning of the wedding, Elena barely slept. She sat at her mirror and tried to make sense of the stranger looking back at her. She did not feel like a bride. She felt like a soldier putting on a uniform for a war she never wanted to fight. Her mother came in and helped her with her hair and did not say anything about hating the man anymore, because there was nothing left to say. It was done. It had been done since the moment her father picked up a pen. Whatever happens in that house, Rosa said, finally fixing a strand of Elena's hair. You remember who you are. You are not what he paid for. You are my daughter. You are stronger than any man with money and guns. And if he ever raises a hand to you, if he ever gives you one reason to run, you come home, and I will hide you where no one will ever find you. Do you understand me? Elena took her mother's hand and pressed it to her cheek. I understand, Mama. Good. Rosa's voice cracked. Now let's get this over with. The car came at 10. It was long and black and silent, and the driver did not speak to her except to hold the door. Elena kissed her parents goodbye on the front step, and her father held her so tightly she felt his whole body shaking, and he said, I'm sorry. One more time, and she said, I know, Papa. And then she got in the car and did not let herself cry because she had promised herself she would not give Adrian Valenti a single tear. The ceremony was short. It was held in a room she did not recognize in a building she was not told the name of. A judge she had never met read words she barely heard. And then Adrian was standing across from her in a dark suit, looking at her the way he had looked at her in the kitchen. Except this time, there was no folder, no threat, no debt hanging in the air between them. There was only the two of them, and a stranger with a book, and a signature that would change everything. "Do you, Elena Moretti," the judge said, "take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband?" She looked at Adrian. He was watching her, and she realized with a jolt that he was not smug, he was not triumphant. He looked, if anything, like a man bracing for a blow. "I do," she said. The words came out cold and clear and final. "And do you, Adrian Valenti, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife?" And here something strange happened. Adrian paused. It was only for a second, but Elena saw it. She saw the muscle in his jaw tighten, saw his eyes drop for just a moment to the ring in his hand, and when he answered, his voice was lower than it had been all morning. "I do," he said, "for as long as she'll allow it." The judge blinked, unsure whether that was part of the script. Elena stared at him. That was not a normal thing to say. That was not what a man who had bought a wife said. A man who had bought a wife said the words and moved on. He did not add "for as long as she'll allow it," like a man who had already accepted that his marriage came with an expiration date that only his bride could set. Then the judge said the words that made it real, and Adrian slid a simple ring onto her finger, and his hands, she noticed, were not entirely steady either. He did not kiss her. He did not try to. He simply looked at her for a long moment, and then he stepped back and gave her space and said quietly, "Thank you." "Don't thank me," Elena said. "I didn't do this for you." "I know," he said. "I never thought you did." The drive to his home was silent. Elena sat as far from him as the seat would allow, staring out the window, watching the city she knew give way to neighborhoods she had only ever heard about, wide streets and iron gates and houses that were really estates pretending to be modest. She had known Adrian was wealthy. She had not understood what wealthy meant until the car passed through a gate that opened on its own and drove up a road lined with trees and stopped in front of a house so large that her family's entire home could have fit inside one wing of it. "This is where I live," Adrian said. "As of today, this is where you live too. There's a room prepared for you, your own room. It locks from the inside, and I'm the only other person with a key, which I will give to you the moment we walk in, so that no one, including me, can ever enter without your permission." Elena turned and looked at him for the first time since the ceremony. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because you're afraid of me," he said simply. "And you have no reason not to be. So I'm telling you the things I would want to know if I were you, walking into a stranger's house at the mercy of a man everyone says has no soul." She did not know what to say to that. "You think this is a trick?" Adrian said, reading her face. "It isn't. I'm not going to touch you, Elena. I'm not going to come to your room. I'm not going to ask you to be anything other than what you are. You'll have your own space, your own life, your own freedom, as much of it as I can give a person while keeping her safe. All I ask is that you live here, and that you let people believe the marriage is real, because there are men in this city who would use my wife against me if they knew the truth. Beyond that, you owe me nothing." "That doesn't make sense," she said. "You paid over $1 million for a wife who's going to live in a locked room and hate you. Why would any man do that?" Adrian looked out his own window then, and for a long moment he did not answer. "Maybe," he said finally, "I've spent my whole life buying things I don't need. Maybe this is just another one." It was a lie. She could hear that it was a lie, but she was too tired and too overwhelmed to fight it. The car stopped. A man opened the door, and Elena Moretti stepped out in front of the enormous house that was now somehow her home, married to a stranger, saved and imprisoned in the same breath. What she did not know, what she could not have known, was that Adrian Valenti had not chosen her by accident. He had not scanned a list of desperate debtors and picked a pretty face. He had gone looking. He had spent good money and better patience making sure her father's small loan ended up in his hands and no one else's, because he had learned months earlier that Giovanni Moretti's daughter was in trouble. And Giovanni Moretti's daughter was the one person on this earth Adrian Valenti had never been able to forget, because 4 years ago, on a cold afternoon, he had never told anyone about a young florist named Elena had done something small and kind for a man everyone else crossed the street to avoid. She had not known who he was. She had not been afraid of him. She had simply been decent to him when the whole world had taught him to expect nothing but fear. And Adrian, who had grown up with no mother and a father who ruled by terror, who had learned before the age of 10 that love was a weakness that got you killed, had walked away from that ordinary afternoon carrying something he did not have a word for. He had carried it for 4 years. He had watched over her from a distance he was ashamed of. He had memorized the flowers she loved, and the dreams she mentioned to strangers, and the way she treated people who could do nothing for her. And when her family began to drown, he had done the only thing a man like him knew how to do. He had used the one language he was fluent in: money, power, control. He had bought her freedom and called it a debt because he did not know how to simply knock on a door and say the truth. The truth being that Adrian Valenti, the coldest man in the city, the man with no heart, had a heart after all, and it had belonged to Elena Moretti for a very long time. She just did not know it yet. Inside the house, Adrian handed her a single brass key exactly as he had promised. "Your room is at the top of the stairs, second door on the left," he said. "There's food in the kitchen whenever you want it. The staff have been told to treat you as the lady of this house, which means whatever you ask for, you receive. If you need anything at all, my study is on the ground floor. Otherwise, I'll stay out of your way." Elena closed her fingers around the key. It was warm, as if he had been holding it for a while. "That's it," she said. "You're just going to leave me alone. That's it. No rules, no conditions, no list of things I'm not allowed to do." Adrian considered the question. "One condition," he said. "Here it comes," she thought. "Here is the trap. When you're ready to hate me out loud," he said, "do it to my face, not to the staff, not to your reflection, not to an empty room. To me. I can handle being hated. I've had a lot of practice. What I can't handle is you swallowing it until it poisons you. So when you need to scream at someone, I'm right downstairs. Understood?" Elena stood in the enormous entryway of a criminal's house, holding a key to a door only she could open, married against her will to a man she had sworn to despise, and found to her horror that she did not have a single cruel thing to say back to him. "I don't understand you," she said instead. "I don't understand any of this." "I know," Adrian said. He turned toward his study, and just before he disappeared through the doorway, he added without looking back, "You will, eventually. And when you do, you're going to be very angry with me all over again. Not for the reason you think, for a different one." Then he was gone, and Elena was left alone in the great silent house, clutching a warm brass key, staring at the flowers he had somehow known she loved, feeling the first small crack form in everything she thought she understood about the man she had just married. The first night in Adrian Valenti's house, Elena did not sleep. She sat with her back against the locked door, the brass key clenched in her fist, waiting for the sound of footsteps that never came. She had braced herself for it. She had spent the whole day telling herself that the kindness was a performance, that the flowers were a trap, that the moment she let her guard down, the real Adrian would appear, the one the whole city feared. She waited for that man until the sky outside began to lighten. He never came. At some point near dawn, she finally understood that no one was going to come. The realization did not comfort her. It unsettled her more than a threat would have, because a threat she could fight. This she did not know how to fight. She fell asleep, sitting up still holding the key. When she woke, there was a tray outside her door. She heard it before she saw it, the soft clink of porcelain being set down, then careful footsteps walking away. She waited until the footsteps faded completely before she opened the door. On the tray was coffee, still hot, made exactly the way she liked it. 2 sugars, a splash of cream. Beside it was a plate of the small almond pastries her mother used to buy from the Italian bakery 3 blocks from their house, the ones Elena had eaten every Sunday of her childhood. She stared at the pastries for a long time. Then she picked up the tray, carried it back into her room, and threw the pastries in the trash without eating a single one, because eating them felt like surrender. But she drank the coffee. She was not a martyr. Days passed like this, a strange, silent war fought entirely through small gestures. Adrian left before sunrise every morning and returned long after dark. Elena rarely saw him. When she did, it was a glimpse, a shadow at the far end of a hallway, the back of his coat as a car pulled away. He kept his word with a precision that frightened her. He did not knock on her door. He did not summon her to dinner. He did not ask her for anything at all. And yet everywhere she turned, she found evidence of him. The books she had mentioned once offhand to the housekeeper appeared on a shelf in the sitting room 3 days later. The brand of tea she preferred replaced the expensive imported kind in the pantry. When she caught a cold in her second week, a doctor arrived at the house within the hour, unbidden, carrying exactly the medicine she needed, and when she asked who had called him, the man only said, "I was asked not to say." She was being cared for by a ghost, and the ghost was her husband. It made her furious. "Where is he?" she demanded one evening, cornering the housekeeper, a quiet older woman named Marta, who had worked in the house for 20 years. "Mr. Valenti is working, Signora." "He's always working. Does he ever come home?" "He comes home every night, Signora. Very late. He looks in on the house, and then he sleeps a few hours, and then he leaves again." Marta hesitated, then added something she probably should not have. "He asks about you, every night. Whether you ate, whether you seemed well, whether you needed anything he had not thought of." Elena's throat went tight. "And what do you tell him?" "The truth. That you are strong, that you are angry, that you throw away the pastries but drink the coffee." Elena almost laughed. "He knows about the pastries. He knows everything about this house, Signora. He always has." Marta looked at her with an expression Elena could not read. "May I say something that is not my place to say?" "You've already started. That man has lived in this house alone for 11 years. In all that time, I have never once seen him care whether another human being ate breakfast. Not once." She picked up her cleaning basket. "You have been here 2 weeks. Now it is the first thing he asks about every single night." Then she walked away, leaving Elena standing alone in the hallway with a feeling in her chest she did not want to have. That night, for reasons she refused to examine, Elena did not throw the pastries away. She still did not go looking for Adrian. But something had shifted some small stone at the bottom of a river, and the current of her certainty was no longer running quite so straight. The thing that broke the pattern was the greenhouse. She discovered it 3 weeks in by accident, wandering a wing of the house she had not yet explored. She turned a corner she had never turned, opened a door she had never opened, and stopped dead in the doorway. It was a greenhouse. A real one. Glass walls and glass ceiling filled with more plants than she could count. But it was not the size that made her hand fly to her mouth. It was the flowers. They were her flowers. The rare, difficult, particular flowers she had spent her whole life loving and never been able to grow, because they needed conditions her father's little shop could never provide. The antique garden roses. The ranunculus in colors that did not exist in ordinary stores. And in the corner, in a climate-controlled case built specifically for it, the single rare stem she had mentioned to a stranger 4 years ago, now growing, thriving, tended by someone who clearly knew exactly what it needed. Elena walked through the greenhouse in a daze, touching leaves, reading the small, handwritten labels beneath each plant. The handwriting was not staff handwriting. It was sharp and precise, and unmistakably a man's. She found Marta and dragged her to the doorway. "Who built this?" "Mr. Valenti, Signora." "When?" Marta hesitated. "When Marta. He began it the week before your wedding. He worked on it himself at night after he returned from the city. Some nights he did not sleep at all. He said it had to be finished before you arrived." Marta's voice softened. "He said you had dreamed of a greenhouse your whole life. He said you should not have to give up your dream just because you were forced to give up your freedom. Elena's legs felt strange beneath her. She reached out and held the door frame. "How did he know I dreamed of a greenhouse?" she said. "I never told him that. I never told anyone that. It's not something a person just knows." Marta looked at her steadily. "That, Signora, is a question you should ask him." That was the night Elena finally went downstairs. She stood outside his study for a full minute, her hand raised to knock her heart hammering for reasons that had nothing to do with fear. Then she knocked before she could talk herself out of it. "Come in," Adrian's voice said. She opened the door. He was sitting behind a large desk, his coat off, for once, his sleeves rolled up surrounded by papers she did not try to read. He looked up, and when he saw it was her, something happened to his face that she had not seen before. His whole careful composure slipped just for a second, and underneath it was something raw and unguarded, a man who had not expected the one thing he wanted to appear in his doorway. Then the composure returned. But she had seen it. She could not unsee it. "Elena," he said. He stood out of some old instinct of manners. "Is something wrong? Do you need something? How did you know about the greenhouse?" He went very still. "The flowers," she said, her voice rising. "The exact flowers. The ones no one grows. The one in the glass case that I have only ever seen in one book in my entire life. The pastries from the bakery on Carmine Street. The coffee. The books. The greenhouse I have wanted since I was 9 years old and never told a single living soul about." "How do you know these things, Adrian? How do you know me?" He did not answer right away. He walked around the desk slowly, and he did not come close to her. He kept a careful distance, but he looked at her the way a man looks at something he has waited a very long time to be allowed to look at. "Sit down," he said. "I don't want to sit down. I want you to answer me. Please." His voice was quiet. "This isn't a short story." Something in the way he said it made her sit. Adrian did not sit. He stood by the window with his back half to her, and for a moment she thought he would not speak at all. When he did, his voice was different than she had ever heard it, lower, older, as if he were reaching back a long way. 4 years ago. He said, "I lost someone. It doesn't matter who. A man who worked for me. A man I trusted, which was my mistake because I had learned very young never to trust anyone, and I broke my own rule, and it cost him his life. I don't say this so you'll feel sorry for me. I say it so you understand what kind of day it was. It was the worst day I had had in years. And I did something I never do. I sent my men away. I told them to leave me alone. And I walked." Elena did not move. "I didn't know where I was going. I ended up in a part of the city I had no reason to be in. A small street, ordinary shops. There was a flower shop on the corner, and outside it on the sidewalk a young woman was setting up a display of flowers in the cold. She had no coat on. Her hands were red. And I stopped because I hadn't slept, and I didn't know where I was, and I must have looked like exactly what I was. A dangerous man having the worst day of his life." He turned to face her. "You looked up at me," he said, "and you were not afraid." Elena's breath caught. "Everyone is afraid of me. Everyone. It is the one constant of my entire life. Children, grown men, women twice my age. The moment they understand who I am, something closes in their eyes, and they treat me the way you treat a loaded gun. Carefully. From a distance. But you didn't know who I was, and even when I stood there long enough that you should have gotten nervous, you didn't close up. You just looked at me, and you saw a man who was clearly not all right, and you said, and I have never forgotten a single word of it. You said, 'You look like you're having a hard day. Do you want a flower? They're better than they look. Everything usually is.'" Elena remembered. It came back to her all at once. The memory she had lost the cold afternoon, the tall stranger in the dark coat, who had stood in front of her shop for so long, she had almost worried about him. She had not been able to place his face, but she remembered the moment. She remembered feeling for no reason she could name that the man in front of her was drowning. "You gave me a flower," Adrian said. "You put it in my hand. You wouldn't take money for it. You said it was on the house because everyone deserves one good thing on a bad day. And then a customer called you, and you turned to help them, and you forgot about me completely the way you forgot the whole thing until 30 seconds ago." He looked down at his own hand as if the flower were still in it. "But I didn't forget. I went home and I looked at that flower on my desk, and I realized I could not remember the last time a single person on this earth had done something for me expecting nothing back. Not out of fear, not out of debt, not because they wanted something. Just because I looked like I needed it. Adrian." "I need to finish," he said. "I've waited 4 years to say it, and I need to finish or I never will." She fell silent. "I told myself I would forget you. It was one flower. It meant nothing. You were a kind girl having a normal afternoon, and I was a broken man reading too much into a small thing. But I couldn't forget you. I found myself walking that street again. I told myself it was coincidence. It wasn't. I wanted to see if you were real, or if I had made you into something you weren't. And you were real. You were exactly as kind on a good day as you had been to a stranger on a bad one. I watched you give flowers to a child who had no money. I watched you help an old woman carry her groceries. I watched you be every single day the thing I had been told my entire life did not exist. A genuinely good person being good when no one was making her, and no one was watching." His voice had grown rough. "I never spoke to you again. I want you to understand that. In 4 years, I never once let you see me. I was ashamed of what I was and what I felt because a man like me has no business feeling anything for a woman like you. You deserved someone clean, someone whose money didn't have blood on it. So I kept my distance, and I told myself that watching over you from far away was enough." "Watching over me," Elena repeated slowly. "What does that mean?" For the first time, Adrian looked ashamed. "When your father's business began to fail, he said, 'I knew. I have people who tell me things. When he took the first loan, I knew who lent it to him, and I knew what kind of man that lender was, and I knew what would happen to your family when your father couldn't pay.' He was going to be destroyed, Elena. Not just financially. The man who held that debt was cruel in ways I won't describe to you. Your father would have suffered, and then he would have come for the rest of you." The blood drained from her face. "So I bought the debt," Adrian said, quietly. "I made sure it came to me and no one else. I told myself I was protecting you, that I would clear it and disappear and you would never even know. That was the plan. Clear the debt, vanish, let you live your life clean the way you deserved." "But that's not what you did," Elena whispered. "No." His jaw tightened. "It's not." "Why?" And here the coldest man in the city, the man of stone, looked at his own wife with something breaking open behind his eyes. "Because I'm not a good man, Elena. That's the truth I've been circling this whole time. A good man would have cleared the debt and walked away and let you go. I had the chance to do exactly that. Everything ready. One signature, and you'd have been free and safe and gone, and you'd have never known I existed." He shook his head slowly. "And I couldn't do it. I sat in this room with the papers in front of me, the papers that would set you free, and I could not make myself sign them, because signing them meant never seeing you again. And I discovered sitting right here that I was too selfish and too weak and too far gone to let that happen." The room was completely silent. "So I told myself a story," he went on, and his voice was full of self-loathing now. "I told myself that if I married you, I could keep you safe forever, not just from this one debt, but from everything, from every man in this city who might ever hurt you. I told myself it was protection. But that was a lie, Elena. I didn't marry you to protect you. Protection was the excuse. The truth is, I married you because I am a coward who could not bear to lose the one person who ever made me feel human, and I used the only power I have, which is money and fear, to trap her into staying." He met her eyes. "You said it yourself the first night. You said I bought you like part of a payment plan, and you were right. That is exactly what I did. The only thing you got wrong was the reason." Elena realized she was crying. She had not noticed when it started. "You had no right," she said, and her voice shook. "Do you understand that you had no right to do that to me? To decide my life for me? To take away my choice and call it love? That's not love, Adrian. Love doesn't put someone in a locked room and pay for the privilege. I know, he said. You took everything from me. My freedom, my future, the chance to fall in love with someone who didn't buy me. You took all of it because you were lonely. I know, he said again, and he did not defend himself, did not argue, did not soften it. You're right about every word of it. I've known it since the day I did it. There is no version of what I did that isn't a crime against you. I want you to say it. I want you to be as angry as you have every right to be. Because I told you the first day when you're ready to hate me, do it to my face. So do it. I'm right here. But Elena, standing in that room with tears running down her face, found that the anger she reached for was not simple anymore. Because in front of her was not the cold monster she had built in her mind. In front of her was a man who had just confessed the ugliest truth about himself without flinching. Who had handed her every weapon she could ever want to hurt him with. Who was standing there, waiting to be struck, and had made no move to protect himself. In front of her was a man who had built her a greenhouse in the dark night after night on no sleep, because a girl he barely knew had once said she dreamed of one. She hated him, and she did not hate him, and the war between those two things tore something open inside her. The flower, she said suddenly. The one in the glass case. You said you'd only seen it in a book. That's a lie. You had it grown, for me. In 4 years you found it, and you learned how to keep it alive, and you built a case just for it on the chance that someday I might see it. Adrian said nothing, which was its own answer. Why? She demanded. Why that flower? Why any of it? Because, he said quietly. The day you gave me the flower on the corner before your customer called you away, you told me your favorite flower was one that almost no one could grow. You said it like it was a joke about yourself that you loved the one thing you'd never be able to have. And you laughed. And I thought about that laugh for 4 years. He looked away from her. I couldn't give you your freedom back. I'd already stolen it. So I did the only thing I could think of. I gave you the thing you thought you could never have. It doesn't make up for anything. I know that. Nothing makes up for it. But I couldn't do nothing. Elena had to sit down again. For a long time, neither of them spoke. The confession hung in the air between them, enormous and terrible, and impossible to take back. Finally, Elena wiped her face with the back of her hand and stood. I need to be alone, she said. Of course. He stepped back immediately, clearing her path to the door, careful as always to give her room. Elena, for whatever it's worth, I don't expect anything to change. I don't expect you to forgive me. I told you the truth because you deserve the truth, not because I think it earns me anything. Tomorrow, everything can go back to how it was. You in your room, me out of your way. If you want, I'll have papers drawn up that give you an income for life and let you leave whenever you choose, and I'll never come near you again. Just say the word. She stopped in the doorway. You'd let me leave. I should have let you leave from the beginning, he said. It's the one right thing I have left to do. She looked at him, this man who had trapped her and freed her in the same breath, who was now offering to undo the whole thing at the moment she finally understood it. I don't know what I want, she said honestly. Yesterday I knew. Today I don't know anything. Then take your time, Adrian said. Take all of it. I've waited 4 years. I can wait longer. She left him there and walked upstairs, and this time when she reached her room, she did not lock the door. She noticed it herself standing there with her hand on the brass key. For 3 weeks she had locked it every night without fail, the last ritual before sleep, the one wall she could still control. Tonight her hand would not turn the key. She stood there for a long minute arguing with herself, and then she left it unlocked, and she did not fully understand why, and it scared her more than anything Adrian had said. The days that followed were unlike anything before. Something had changed, and both of them knew it, and neither of them named it. Adrian did not press her. If anything, he grew more careful, more distant, as if afraid that having confessed, he might now expect too much. He still left before dawn. He still returned late. But now when they crossed paths, they spoke. Small things at first. A comment about the weather. A question about the greenhouse. Then slowly larger things. She learned that he had grown up in that house with a father who ruled through terror, who had taught him that affection was a weakness enemies would exploit, who had once made a 9-year-old Adrian watch something so terrible that Adrian still would not describe it. She learned that his mother had died when he was small, and that no one had ever hugged him, not once in the entire time he could remember, until he was a grown man and had stopped expecting anyone ever would. She learned that the man the city called heartless had spent the last several years quietly moving his family's business away from its darkest activities, cutting off the worst of what the Valenti name had always meant, taking losses no one understood, because he never explained himself to anyone. "Why change now?" she asked him one evening in the kitchen over coffee that had somehow become a nightly thing without either of them deciding it. "You built an empire on fear. Now you're dismantling it piece by piece. Why?" Adrian looked at her over his cup. "You really don't know. If I knew, I wouldn't ask." "Because of you," he said simply. "Because 4 years ago, a girl told me everything is usually better than it looks. And I spent my whole life believing the opposite. That everything is worse than it looks. That people are cruel and the world is a trap, and the only safety is to be more frightening than everyone else." He set the cup down. "You made me wonder if I'd had it backwards my whole life. And a man can only wonder that for so long before he has to find out." Elena stared at him. "I started changing things the year after I met you," he said. "Long before your father's debt. Long before any of this. You never knew. You had no idea you'd changed anything at all. You gave a stranger a flower and forgot about it, and that stranger went home and started tearing down the only life he'd ever known, one brick at a time, trying to become a man who might someday be worth being kind to." He gave a small, tired laugh. "I never thought you'd find out. I certainly never thought you'd end up living in my house. Life is strange." That was the moment. Elena would understand it later, looking back. That was the moment the thing she had sworn would never happen began quietly without permission to happen anyway. She did not fall in love with him that night. It was not that simple. What happened was smaller and more dangerous. She stopped being able to see him as her enemy. And a woman cannot hate a man she can no longer see as her enemy, no matter how hard she tries, no matter how many good reasons she has. "I still haven't forgiven you," she told him, standing to leave. "I know. What you did was wrong, all of it. The debt, the marriage, all of it. Understanding why you did it doesn't make it right. I've never once claimed it did." She stopped at the kitchen door the same way she had stopped at his study door, this thing between them apparently made entirely of doorways and things said just before leaving. "But," she said, and then hated herself for the word because a "but" at this moment gave away far too much. "I don't want the papers, the ones that let me leave. Not yet." She did not look at him. "I'm not staying for you. I want that to be clear. I'm staying because I have a greenhouse full of flowers no one else on earth would know how to keep alive, and because I'm not finished being angry, and a person can't stay angry at someone who isn't there." She finally glanced back. "That's the only reason." Adrian nodded slowly. He had the good sense not to smile, though something moved behind his eyes that was warmer than anything she had seen there before. "Whatever the reason," he said, "you're welcome here as long as you want to stay." Elena went up to her room. She did not lock the door, and down in the kitchen, Adrian Valenti sat alone with 2 empty coffee cups. The coldest man in the city, and for the first time in more years than he could count, he put his head in his hands, not from grief, not from fear, but from something so unfamiliar it took him a long moment to recognize it. Hope. Terrible, dangerous, unbearable hope. He did not know, sitting there, that hope was the most dangerous thing a man in his position could feel. He did not know that far across the city, in rooms he no longer controlled, men who had once feared the Valenti name had begun to notice that the great Adrian Valenti had gone soft, had married a nobody, had started dismantling the very empire that had made him untouchable. He did not know they were watching. He did not know they were waiting. He did not know that the one thing he had spent his whole life avoiding, a weakness the world could see now, had a name and a face and slept upstairs in a room with an unlocked door. He only knew that he was happy for one quiet moment in a life that had taught him happiness was never allowed to last. The hope lasted exactly 9 days. Elena would remember that number later, the way you remember the last ordinary thing before your life splits in two. 9 days of coffee in the kitchen. 9 days of unlocked doors. 9 days of a marriage that had begun as a prison, slowly, cautiously becoming something neither of them dared to name out loud. On the 10th day, everything Adrian had feared his whole life came to collect. It began with a phone call he took in his study with the door closed. Elena did not hear the words, but she heard the tone, and the tone was one she had not heard from him before. Not cold, not controlled. Something underneath it that she recognized instantly because she had felt it herself the night the men came to her family's door. Fear. She waited outside the study until he came out. When he did, his face had changed. The careful softness of the last 9 days was gone, wiped clean, replaced by the man she had first met in her kitchen. But now she knew him well enough to see what was underneath the coldness, and what was underneath it terrified her. "What happened?" she said. "Nothing you need to worry about." "Adrian, what happened?" He looked at her for a long moment, clearly weighing how much to say, and she watched him decide to lie. "Don't," she said before he could. "Don't do that. Don't protect me by lying to me. I've had enough of men in my life deciding what I can handle. My father did that, and look where it got us. Tell me the truth." His jaw worked. And then, because he had promised her the truth, and he was a man who kept his promises even when they cost him, he told her. "There's a man named Salvatore Renna," he said. "For 30 years he was my father's closest partner. When my father died and I took over, Renna expected to run things through me. A boy of 22 he thought easy to control. He was wrong. I pushed him out. I've spent years cutting away the parts of this business he built, the parts that hurt people, and every cut I made cost him money and power and reputation. He has hated me for a long time. But hate isn't enough to move a man like Renna. He needed a reason, an opening." Adrian's voice dropped. "For years I never gave him one. I had no family, no friends, nothing he could use. I made sure of it. A man with nothing to lose can't be threatened." Elena's blood went cold because she understood where this was going before he said it. "And then," Adrian said, "I married you." The room seemed to tilt. "That call," he went on, "was a warning from one of the few men I still trust. Renna knows about you. He knows you're not just a wife on paper. He's had someone watching this house, and whoever it was, saw enough to understand that the great Adrian Valenti, the man with no weaknesses, finally has one." He looked at her, and his voice broke slightly on the next words. "He has a weakness now, and her name is Elena." She should have been afraid, part of her was, but a larger, stranger part of her felt something else rise up hot and fierce. "So this is what you were afraid of," she said, "this whole time. This is why you kept everyone at a distance your whole life. This is why you never let anyone close." "Yes. You knew this could happen, and you married me anyway." Adrian flinched. It was the cruelest thing she could have said, and they both knew it, and she watched it land. "Yes," he said quietly. "I did. And it's the thing I'll never forgive myself for. Not the debt, not the marriage. This. I knew what loving someone would do. I knew it would paint a target on you. And I was so desperate to have you near me that I told myself I could keep you safe, that I was strong enough, that my name still meant enough to protect you." His hands were shaking. "I lied to myself because I wanted you more than I wanted you safe. And now Renna is going to use you to destroy me, and if anything happens to you, it will be because I couldn't do the one thing a man who loved you should have done, which was leave you alone." The confession broke something open in the room. "Then we leave," Elena said. "Both of us. We go somewhere he can't find us. You have money. You have people. We disappear. You do that, run with me." The question stopped her because she had not thought before she said it, and now that she had said it, she realized what it meant. We. Both of us. She had included him without hesitation, this man she had sworn to hate, and the word had come out of her mouth as naturally as breathing. "I don't know why I said that," she admitted. "I do," Adrian said softly. And for one dangerous second, they simply looked at each other, and the thing between them that had no name was suddenly undeniably there, filling the whole room. Then the moment shattered because a man appeared in the doorway. One of Adrian's breathless, his face grim. "Boss, you need to see this." What he showed them was a photograph. It had been left at the front gate an hour ago, tucked into an envelope with no note. It was a picture of Elena, standing outside a small shop across the city, a shop Adrian did not recognize, holding a paper cup of coffee, laughing at something. "That's from this morning," Elena whispered. "I went out. I told Marta I needed air. I was gone for 40 minutes. The photograph had been taken from very close. Close enough that whoever took it could have reached out and touched her. Adrian's face when he understood this was not something Elena would ever forget. She had seen him cold. She had seen him tender. She had never seen him like this. Every trace of the man who built her greenhouse vanished, and in his place stood something ancient and terrible. The thing his father had made him, the thing the whole city feared, fully awake for the first time since she had known him. "Get everyone," he said, and his voice was so quiet it was worse than a shout. "Every man I have. I want this house sealed. I want to know who took this photograph, and I want to know before morning." He turned to Elena. "You are not leaving this house again. Not for air. Not for anything. Do you understand me?" "Adrian? Do you understand me?" "Yes," she said. "I understand. He left to make his calls, and Elena stood alone in the study, holding the photograph of herself, laughing, unaware, 40 minutes away from a man who could have killed her, and chose instead to send a picture because the picture was the point. The picture said we can reach her whenever we want. The picture said your wall has a door now, and we know exactly where it is. That night, Elena did not sleep, and neither did anyone in the house. She lay awake, listening to the sounds of men moving through the halls, the low voices, the cars coming and going. And around 3 in the morning, unable to bear it anymore, she got up and went downstairs, and she found Adrian exactly where she expected him, in his study, awake, surrounded by papers and phones, a man at war. He looked up when she came in. "You should be sleeping." "So should you." "I don't sleep much. You know that by now." She sat down across from him, the same chair where she had sat when he told her everything, and for a while, neither of them spoke. Then she asked the question that had been eating at her all night. "The man he killed," she said, 4 years ago, "the one whose death sent you walking to my street. Was that Rena?" Adrian went still. "You never said who did it," she pressed. "You said you lost a man you trusted, and it was your mistake for trusting him. You blamed yourself, but you didn't kill him. Someone else did. It was Rena, wasn't it? He killed your man to send you a message, the same way he's sending me photographs now." Adrian was quiet for a long time. "You're smarter than is good for you," he said finally. "Yes, it was Rena. The man he killed was named Tommaso. He was the closest thing I ever had to a friend. He was helping me dismantle the old operations, feeding me information, and Rena found out. He killed Tommaso and left him where I would find him as a warning to stop, to remind me what happens to people who get close to me." His voice was hollow. "I got the message. That's why I walked away that day. That's why I stopped trusting anyone. That's why I built a life with nothing in it Rena could ever take from me again." He looked at her, and the irony of it was written all over his face. "And then I met a girl on a corner who gave me a flower, and 4 years later, I threw all of it away, every rule that kept me safe, because I could not stay away from her." Elena felt the weight of it settle over her. "So this is a pattern," she said. "He takes the people you care about. He took Tommaso to warn you. Now he's coming for me." "He won't touch you," Adrian said, and there was iron in it. "I will burn this entire city to the ground before I let Rena put a hand on you. Do you hear me? I let Tommaso die because I didn't see it coming. I will not make that mistake twice. I would die first. I mean that as literally as a man can mean anything. I don't want you to die, Elena said. The words came out before she could stop them. Adrian looked at her. I don't want you to die either, she said quieter. That's what I've been lying awake realizing. 3 weeks ago, I would have handed you to Rena myself, and now the thought of something happening to you makes me feel like I can't breathe. I don't understand it. I don't want it. You took my whole life away from me, and I should hate you, and instead I'm sitting in your study at 3 in the morning, terrified that a man I've never met is going to take you from me too. Her voice cracked. What did you do to me, Adrian? What did you do? He crossed the room before he seemed to decide to. He knelt in front of her chair so their faces were level, and he did not touch her. He never touched her without permission, but he was closer than he had ever been. I didn't do anything to you, he said. That's the truth I've never told you because I had no right to it. Whatever you're feeling, I didn't put it there. I couldn't. I don't have that kind of power over anyone, least of all you. If you feel something for me, it's because it's real, and it grew on its own in a locked room against every good reason you had to feel nothing. And that's the only thing in my whole life I've ever wanted that I didn't take by force. His voice was barely above a whisper. So don't blame me for it. Please. Let it be the one thing that's actually yours. Elena looked at him, kneeling in front of her. This man of blood and fear and money undone completely. And she understood that she had lost the war she had been fighting since the first night. She had sworn she would never love him. She had built that vow into a wall, brick by brick, and she had defended it with everything she had. And it had fallen anyway quietly, without a single dramatic moment, the way the most important things always fall. I'm not going to say it, she told him, her voice shaking. The thing you want me to say, I'm not going to say it. Not while a man is out there hunting us. Not while everything is like this. If I say it now, I'll never know if I meant it or if I was just scared. Do you understand? Yes, Adrian said. I understand better than you know. But when this is over, she said, when Rena is gone and we're safe and there's no gun to anyone's head and I can think clearly, if I still feel it then, I'll say it then, and you'll know it was real. Adrian closed his eyes. When he opened them, they were wet, though no tears fell because a man like him had learned a long time ago how to keep them from falling. Then I have something to live for, he said, which is more than I've had in a very long time. They did not touch. They did not kiss. They simply stayed there close in the quiet two people who had found each other at the worst possible moment, and for a little while the war outside seemed very far away. It did not stay far away for long. The next blow came at dawn, and it came in a way neither of them expected, because Rena was cleverer than a man who simply sends threats. He did not come for Elena. He was too smart for that. He knew that Adrian had sealed the house, that Elena was surrounded now by every man he had, that reaching her would cost him more than she was worth. So he went somewhere the walls were lower. The call came from Elena's mother, and it came in through Elena's own phone, and the moment Elena saw her mother's name, her stomach dropped, because her mother never called this early. Mama! Elena! Rosa's voice was wrong. Tight. Controlled in the way people control their voices when someone is listening. Elena, there are men here. At the house. They came this morning. They say they know Adrian. They say they just want to talk. They're being very polite. Elena was on her feet. Across the room, Adrian saw her face and stood too. Mama, listen to me. Don't do anything they say. Don't go anywhere with them. Are Papa and you both there? Are you both all right? We're fine, sweetheart. We're fine. They haven't hurt us. They just want... There was a sound, a man's voice in the background, low, and then a pause. They want to speak to Adrian. They say to give the phone to Adrian. Elena's hand was shaking so hard she could barely hold the phone. She looked at Adrian, and he was already reaching for it, his face a mask of the old terrible coldness, and she gave it to him. This is Valenti, he said. Elena could not hear the other side, but she watched Adrian's face, and she saw it go through something. A flicker of fury, then something worse, something that looked almost like defeat, and she knew before he said a word that Rena had found the one move Adrian could not counter. Adrian listened for a long time. Then he said in a voice so calm it frightened her more than shouting would have, "If you touch either of them, there is nowhere on this earth you can hide from me. You know that. You worked for my father. You know exactly what this family does to people who touch what's ours." A pause. "I'm listening," Adrian said. "What do you want?" Another pause. And then Elena watched her husband's face change one final time. Watched the fury drain out of it, and something cold and resolved take its place, and she knew Rena had named his price. "Fine," Adrian said. "Just me, no one else. You let them go, you let my wife stay out of it, and I come to you alone. That's the deal, or there's no deal, and we both find out how many of your men are still loyal enough to die for you when it comes to it. Your choice." He listened. He nodded once, though the man on the other end could not see it. "Tonight," he said, "I'll be there." He ended the call. For a moment the study was completely silent. Elena stared at him, her heart pounding so hard she could feel it in her throat. "What did he say?" she whispered. "Adrian, what did you just agree to?" Adrian set the phone down very carefully, as if it might break, or as if he might. "Rena has your parents," he said. "They're not hurt. He's smart. He knows hurting them costs him his only leverage. But he has them, and he'll keep them until I do what he wants." "Which is what?" Adrian looked at her, and in his eyes she saw the answer before he said it, and she started shaking her head before he even opened his mouth. "He wants me," Adrian said. "That's all. He wants me to come to him tonight alone with no men and no weapons. In exchange, he lets your parents go, and he swears on his life that he'll never touch you or your family again." "No," Elena said. No, absolutely not. You know what he'll do. You know exactly what he'll do the second you walk in there. He killed Tommaso just to send you a message. What do you think he's going to do to you, the man who took everything from him?" "I know what he's going to do," Adrian said quietly. "Then you can't go. Elena, you can't go. There has to be another way. We call the police. We send your men. We do anything except send you to a man who's going to kill you. There is no other way." He took a step toward her. "Listen to me. Please. This is the only version of tonight where your parents live, where you live. If I don't go, Rena takes what he can and disappears, and he spends the rest of his life picking your family apart one person at a time, and there will be nothing I can do to stop him because he'll never give me a clean shot again. This is the one moment where I can end it, where I can trade the one thing he actually wants, which is me, for the safety of everyone I care about." His voice softened. "For you, for your mother and father. This is the one thing I can do that actually protects you instead of endangering you. Don't take it from me. It's the only good thing I've had the chance to do since the day I met you." Elena was crying now openly, no longer trying to hide it. "You said you had something to live for. You said it an hour ago. You knelt right there and you said Rena gave you something to live for, and now you're telling me you're going to go let him kill you." "I said I have something to live for," Adrian said. "I didn't say I get to keep it. Those are different things. A man can have a reason to live and still have to die for it. Sometimes that's the whole point of having one." "That's not fair," she sobbed. "That's not fair, Adrian. You don't get to do this. You don't get to trap me into caring about you and then leave. You don't get to make me love you and then walk into a room to die. You don't." And there it was, the word she had sworn not to say until it was safe. It had come out anyway, dragged out of her by terror, and the moment it was in the air, they both went still. "You said," Adrian started. "I know what I said." She wiped her face furiously. "I said I wouldn't say it until it was over, until it was safe. Well, it's not safe, and it's not over. And I said it anyway, so now you know it's real, because I'm too scared to be lying. I love you. God help me, I love you, and I don't even fully understand how it happened, and now you want to go die and leave me with it. So don't. Don't you dare. Find another way." Adrian crossed the last of the distance between them, and for the first time since the day they married, he touched her without asking. though even now his hands were gentle, cupping her face, wiping her tears with his thumbs. A man who had killed people, holding her like she was made of glass. "You just gave me the only thing I ever wanted," he said, his voice rough. "Do you understand what that means to me? 4 years I carried you around like a secret. I never once believed I'd hear you say those words. Never. And now I have, and it means I have to go even more than I did before. Because now there's a version of the future where you and I are together safe, free, and Rena is the only thing standing between us and it. So I'm going to go remove him. That's all. I'm going to go take the one obstacle between me and the only thing I've ever wanted, and I'm going to remove it. He'll kill you first." "Maybe." Adrian pressed his forehead to hers. "Maybe he will. But I've walked into rooms full of men who wanted me dead more times than you can imagine, and I'm still here. Rena is old, and he's scared, and scared men make mistakes. I'm not walking in there to die, Elena. I'm walking in there to win. There's a difference. For the first time in my life, I actually want to come home. That changes everything about how a man fights." She grabbed his wrists. Promise me you're coming back." And Adrian Valenti, the man who never lied to her, who had told her every ugly truth about himself without flinching, looked into her eyes and made the one promise he did not know if he could keep. "I promise," he said. "I'm coming back to you. And when I do, I'm going to hold you to what you just said, every word of it, for the rest of our lives." She kissed him then. She did it herself, pulled him down to her and kissed him. And it was the first time, and it was desperate and salt-stained and full of everything neither of them had let themselves feel for weeks. And she was terrified, possibly the last time too. When it ended, Adrian held her for one long moment. Then he stepped back, and the coldness came down over him like armor, and he was Valenti again, the man the whole city feared, and he began to give the orders that would carry him into the longest night of both their lives. He did not know as he prepared to walk into Rena's trap that Rena had never intended to honor the deal. He did not know that even now the old man was making a second arrangement, a betrayal within a betrayal, one that would put Elena in a room with a gun before the night was over, despite every promise, despite every wall Adrian had built. He did not know that the one person he was trying to protect was about to walk straight into the center of the danger of her own free will, because a woman who has just admitted she is in love does not sit quietly at home while the man she loves goes to die. He only knew that he had at last something worth losing everything for. And in his world, that was the most dangerous thing a man could ever have. Adrian left at 9 o'clock that night, and he left the way a man leaves who does not know if he is coming back. He said goodbye to Elena in the entryway, and it was a quiet goodbye because the loud things had already been said. He held her face in his hands one more time. He told her Marta would stay with her, that the house was sealed, that 6 of his most trusted men would remain behind and let no one in or out. He told her that whatever she heard tonight, whatever anyone told her, she was to stay inside these walls until he walked back through the door himself. "Say it back to me," he said. "Tell me you'll stay." "I'll stay," Elena said. She was lying, and some part of him must have known it because he looked at her a moment longer than he needed to, searching her face. But there was no time, and there was a car waiting, and there were 2 parents across the city in the hands of a man who killed people to send messages. So Adrian chose to believe her. He kissed her forehead, and he turned and he walked out into the dark, and Elena stood in the doorway and watched the car until its lights disappeared through the gate. Then she counted to 60, and she went to find another way out. She was not a fool. She knew what she was risking. But she also knew something Adrian, for all his intelligence, had refused to let himself see. She knew that Salvatore Rena had no intention of letting anyone walk out of that meeting alive. A man does not spend years building a trap and then honor a handshake. Adrian was walking to his death believing he was buying everyone's safety, and the terrible truth was that his death would buy nothing. Rena would kill Adrian, and then he would come back and finish what he started, because the whole point of taking Elena's parents had never been the parents. It had been to draw out the one thing that made Adrian human, so that Rena could kill that too. Elena understood this the way she understood everything, by reading the parts of the situation no one said out loud. And she understood one more thing. She understood that she was the only card left in the deck that Rena had not accounted for. Adrian had made himself the price. He had walked in alone and unarmed, believing that was the trade. But there was a version of tonight Rena had planned for, and a version he had not. And the version he had not planned for was a florist with nothing to lose walking into his world and refusing to play the role he had written for her. Getting out of the house was harder than she expected, but not impossible. The men were watching the gate and the doors. They were not watching the greenhouse, which had a service entrance that opened onto the grounds, because Adrian had built it as a gift and not a fortress. Elena went out through her flowers, through the glass room he had made for her in the dark on no sleep. And she thought as she slipped through the door, he never imagined she would use against him. That there was something almost unbearable about escaping to save his life through the one place that proved he loved her. She had one advantage, and it was the phone call. When her mother had called, Elena had heard things in the background. A train. The particular rhythm of a train passing close, twice at an interval. She knew this city. She had grown up in it, delivered flowers across it, and there were only so many places where a train passed that close that often. It was not certainty. It was a guess. But it was a guess built on a lifetime of paying attention, and it was all she had. She took a car from the long line of them in Adrian's garage, one whose keys hung by the door, and she drove into the night toward a part of the city she had no business going to. Alone, unarmed, with nothing but the address her instincts had built out of the sound of a train. Across the city, Adrian walked into Rena's building exactly as he had promised. Alone, unarmed. His hands loose at his sides. There were men everywhere. He counted them out of habit, the way he had counted things his whole life, and the number was not good. But he had known the number would not be good. He had not come here to win a fight. He had come here to end one. They brought him to a large room, where Salvatore Rena sat waiting, an old man, now thinner than Adrian remembered, but with the same eyes, the eyes of a man who had spent his entire life deciding who lived and who did not, and had never once lost sleep over it. "Adrian Valenti," Rena said, and he smiled, and the smile was worse than any weapon in the room. "Look at you. The boy who thought he was better than all of us. The boy who was going to make the family clean." He spread his hands. "And here you are. Walked in the front door, no men, no guns, all because of a woman. Your father would be ashamed. Do you know that everything he built, and you threw it away for a girl who sells flowers?" "Where are her parents?" Adrian said. He did not react to any of it. He had learned long ago that men like Rena fed on reactions. Safe, for now, in a room not far from here. Rena leaned back. "I'm a man of my word, Adrian, unlike you. You gave everyone your word you were one thing, and then you spent years becoming another. So don't lecture me about honor." He studied Adrian with something like curiosity. "You really came alone. I didn't think you would. I thought you'd try something clever, but no, you just walked in. You must love her very much." "Let them go," Adrian said. "You have me. That was the deal. Let her parents go, and this ends here." "Oh, it ends here," Rena agreed. "It absolutely ends here." And he nodded to one of his men, and Adrian understood in that instant exactly what Elena had understood hours earlier. That there had never been a deal. That the word had never meant anything. That he had walked in here for nothing. Adrian felt the cold clarity that came to him in moments like this. The thing his father had beaten into him. The ability to become perfectly calm, at the exact moment calm made no sense. He looked at the men around him, at the gun being drawn, at the old man smiling in his chair, and he thought with a strange distant sorrow that he had failed. That he had promised Elena he would come back, and he was not going to be able to keep that promise, and the last thing he had told the only person he ever loved was going to turn out to be a lie. And then the door opened, and everything changed. "Salvatore Rena," said a voice Adrian knew better than his own heartbeat. Every man in the room turned. And Adrian felt the floor drop out of the world, because standing in the doorway alone, unarmed, her chin up, and her eyes blazing, was Elena. For one full second, Adrian could not breathe. Everything he had done tonight, every calculation, Every sacrifice had been built on one foundation, that she was safe behind his walls. And now she was here in the center of the very trap he had walked into to keep her out of, and the sight of her destroyed him more completely than any bullet could have. "Elena," he said, and his voice was not calm anymore. "What did you do? What did you do?" But Elena was not looking at him. She was looking at Rena, and she walked into the room like she owned it past armed men who were too surprised to stop her, and she stopped a few feet from the old man's chair. Rena's smile had faded into something calculating. "Well," he said slowly, "this is unexpected. The wife delivers herself. How convenient." "You wanted a weakness," Elena said. Her voice did not shake, which astonished even her. "You spent years looking for one, and you couldn't find one because Adrian never gave you one. So you built your whole plan around me. I'm the crack in the wall. I'm the thing you finally found that he'd give everything to protect." She took another step. "So here I am. You don't have to hunt me. You don't have to send men to my mother's house. You don't have to take pictures of me drinking coffee. Here I am. The weakness delivered to your door." "Elena, stop," Adrian said, and there was raw panic in it now, a thing no one in that room had ever heard from Adrian Valenti. "Stop talking. Rena, she has nothing to do with this. She's not part of it. Let her walk out and I'll do anything you want. Anything." "You see," Elena said to Rena, not taking her eyes off the old man. "You hear that? That's the sound of a man who'll do anything. You've never had that before, have you? All these years, all your threats, and Adrian never once begged you for anything. And now he's begging. Because of me." She held Rena's gaze. "So let's be smart about this. You don't want Adrian dead. Adrian dead is worthless to you. A dead man can't sign anything, can't transfer anything, can't hand you back the empire you think he stole. You want him alive and broken and doing what you say. And the only thing on this earth that makes Adrian Valenti do what he's told is standing right in front of you." Adrian's mind was racing. He could not understand what she was doing. She was walking herself deeper into the trap, offering herself, and he could not see the shape of it, could not find the angle, and it was killing him. But Rena could see it. Rena had spent 50 years in rooms like this, and he leaned forward, interested now. "Go on," he said. "You take me," Elena said, "as insurance. Adrian does whatever you want as long as you have me, because he knows what happens to me if he doesn't. You let my parents go because they were never the point. And Adrian walks out of here alive, because a live Adrian who obeys you is worth 1,000 times more than a dead one who taught the whole city that you can murder a Valenti and survive it." She lifted her chin. "That's the deal. That's the smart play. You've been trying to break him for years. I'm handing you the way to do it. All you have to do is not be stupid enough to kill the one man whose obedience you actually want." The room was silent. Adrian stared at his wife, and slowly, horribly, he understood what she was doing, and it was worse than anything he could have imagined, because it was brilliant, and it would work, and it would cost her everything. She was trading herself for him. She was doing to Rena exactly what Adrian had done to her family in her kitchen weeks ago. She was making herself the debt, the price, the payment plan. She was offering Rena a lifetime of her own imprisonment in exchange for Adrian's life, and she was framing it so cleverly that a man like Rena would take it, because it gave him the one thing he had always wanted, which was Adrian on a leash. "No," Adrian said. "No. Rena, don't listen to her. She's lying. I won't obey you. You can hold her for 100 years and I'll never do a single thing you say. Kill me. Kill me right now and take nothing, because that's all you're getting from me. Her plan doesn't work if I won't play along, and I won't. I swear to God I won't." "He's lying," Elena said calmly. "Look at his face. He'd cut off his own hand before he let you hurt me. You know it. I know it. He knows it. He's the worst liar in this room, because the one thing he can't fake is not caring whether I live." And it was true. Adrian's face, that famous cold mask, had betrayed him completely. Everyone in the room could see it. The great Adrian Valenti would do anything, anything at all, to keep this woman breathing. It was written all over him. Rena began to laugh. It was a low, delighted, awful sound. "Oh, she's good," he said. "She's very good. Adrian, where did you find her? A flower shop. My God, you should have married her years ago. She's smarter than your entire operation. He rose from his chair slowly and looked Elena up and down with new appreciation. She's right, of course. She's completely right. Dead, you're a martyr, and martyrs make trouble. Alive and obedient, you're mine. And the leash is standing right here delivering herself, telling me exactly how to use her. He nodded as if a business arrangement had been concluded. I accept. The girl stays. The parents go. And you, Adrian, go home, and you wait for my instructions, and every time you think about disobeying, you remember whose life is in my hands. No? Adrian said again, but it came out weaker this time, because he could feel the trap closing, and he could not see how to stop it without getting Elena killed. And then Elena did the thing that no one, not Adrian, not Rena, not a single armed man in that room had prepared for. She turned her head just slightly toward the door she had come through, and she said in a clear, carrying voice, not to Rena, not to Adrian, but to someone none of them could see. He confessed. You heard all of it. He just took the deal, kidnapping, extortion, and he named the murder himself in front of witnesses. The room froze. Rena's face changed. What did you say? I said, Elena repeated, that you just confessed to everything out loud on a recording to a room that includes 2 federal agents who have been building a case against you for 3 years and could never get you to say a single incriminating word. She looked back at him, and now she smiled, and it was not a kind smile. You spent all this time looking for Adrian's weakness. You never once thought to ask whether the florist had one of her own. I didn't come here to save him with love, Salvatore. I came here to end you with a recording. The love just made it convincing. For one heartbeat, no one moved. Then everything happened at once. The doors on every side of the room came open, and they came open hard, and the men who poured through them wore vests and carried weapons and shouted words that turned Rena's soldiers to statues. Because Elena had not driven across the city alone. She had made one phone call before she left to a number Adrian did not know. She had a number she had found in a card tucked into the black folder Adrian himself had left in her kitchen weeks ago. A card belonging to a man who had approached her quietly months before. Any of this, a man whose whole career had been built on one impossible goal, which was to put Salvatore Rena in a cell. She had not planned it in an afternoon. That was the twist beneath the twist. Elena Moretti had been contacted long before she ever met Adrian back when her father's debt first landed in dangerous hands, and she had said no then because saying yes meant becoming bait. But she had kept the card. And tonight, with the man she loved walking into a room to die, she had finally called the number, and she had told them she could deliver Rena a confession, if they could deliver her a rescue, and she had walked into the lion's mouth wearing a wire and carrying nothing but her own nerve. Adrian understood all of it in the space of a single second, watching agents flood the room, watching Rena's men drop their weapons, watching the old man who had killed Tommaso and terrorized his family for years, put his hands slowly into the air with an expression of pure, incandescent disbelief. And Adrian understood something else too, something that hollowed him out and filled him back up in the same instant. She had done for him exactly what he had done for her. He had used the one power he had, money, to trap her into safety. She had used the one power she had, the fact that no one ever suspected the florist, to trap Rena into a cell and save his life. He had thought he was the one protecting her. He had walked in tonight to sacrifice himself for her. And all along she had been 3 moves ahead, walking into the same fire, risking the same everything, refusing to let him die alone for her the way Tommaso had died alone for him. In the chaos, he crossed the room to her. He did not care about the agents, did not care about Rena, did not care about anything except getting his hands on her, and when he reached her, he pulled her against him so hard it drove the breath out of both of them. You promised me you'd stay, he said into her hair, and his voice was shaking apart. You looked me in the eye and you promised. I lied, Elena said. Her arms were around him so tightly her knuckles were white. You lie to protect me, I lie to protect you. That's the marriage. Get used to it. You could have died. Do you understand that if any one thing had gone wrong, if he'd searched you, if a single man in that doorway had panicked? You walked in here to die for me tonight, Elena said, pulling back just enough to look at him. You don't get to be angry that I wasn't willing to sit home and let you. You don't get to love me that much and then be surprised when I love you back the same way. Her eyes were fierce and full of tears. I told you. When it was over, if I still felt it, I'd say it, and you'd know it was real. Well, it's over. And I walked into a room full of killers wearing a wire to say it. So believe me when I tell you. I love you, Adrian. Not the man everyone's afraid of. You, the one who built me a greenhouse, the one who kept a flower alive for 4 years. I love you, and I'm not going to lose you, not to Rena, not to your guilt, not to anything. Do you understand me? Adrian Valenti, the coldest man in the city, the man of stone, the man who had not wept since he was a child, because his father had beaten the tears out of him, stood in a room full of federal agents with the man who murdered his best friend, being dragged away in handcuffs, and he wept. Openly, without shame. His forehead pressed to his wife's, his hands framing her face, tears running down a face that the whole city believed could not make them. I understand, he said. God help me, I understand. Behind them, they were pulling Rena toward the door. The old man was still in shock, still trying to understand how a lifetime of caution had been undone in 10 minutes by a woman who sold flowers. As they passed, he turned his head and looked at Elena with something almost like respect. You would have made a good boss, he said. Better than him, better than any of us. Elena did not look away from Adrian. No, she said. I would have made a good florist. That was always all I wanted. He's the one who dragged me into your world. She finally glanced at Rena one last time. And I'm the one who's dragging him back out of it. Goodbye, Salvatore. Enjoy the cell. I hope it has a window. Everyone deserves one good thing, even you. They took him away. And it was at last over. Later, much later. After the agents had taken their statements, after Elena's parents had been found unharmed and wept over, and sent home with more protection than a head of state, after the sun had come up on a city where the name Rena would never frighten anyone again, Adrian and Elena stood together in the quiet of a world that had suddenly impossibly stopped trying to kill them. There's something I have to tell you, Adrian said. And you're not going to like it. Elena braced herself. What? The man you called. The agent. The one whose card was in the folder. Adrian looked at her. I knew about him. I've known for a long time. He's been trying to get to Rena for years, and he thought the way to do it was through me. He approached me before I ever bought your father's debt. And I told him no, because working with him meant admitting the truth about my own family, my own past. And I wasn't ready. He shook his head slowly. You did in one night what I was too much of a coward to do in 3 years. You didn't just save me from Rena. You saved me from myself, from the version of me that would have kept protecting the very thing I claimed to hate, because tearing it all the way down meant facing what I'd been. Elena was quiet for a moment. So we both had the same card, she said. We both had the same way out. And neither of us took it for years, because taking it meant giving up the wall we hid behind. Yes. And it took loving each other to make either of us finally use it. Adrian looked at her, this woman who understood everything, who had walked into the fire for him, who had beaten a monster with a florist's patience and a wire and a card she'd kept in a drawer for months. Yes, he said again. That's exactly what it took. And for the first time since a cold afternoon 4 years ago, when a stranger handed a broken man a flower and told him everything was usually better than it looked, Adrian Valenti allowed himself to believe that she had been right all along. He did not know yet how they would build a life out of the wreckage of everything that had brought them here. He did not know how long it would take Elena to fully forgive the way it had all begun, or how many quiet mornings it would take him to learn that he was allowed to be happy. Those were things that lay ahead in the ordinary days that were coming, the days he had never let himself imagine. He only knew that she was in his arms, and she was alive. And she had said the words and meant them in the one place on earth where a lie would have cost her everything. And that for a man who had spent his whole life believing he was born to be alone was a beginning he had never dared to dream of. Forgiveness, Elena learned, did not arrive all at once. It came the way spring comes to a cold country, in fits and starts. 2 warm days, followed by a frost, and then without anyone quite noticing. The moment it happened, one morning, the whole world was green. The weeks after Rena's arrest were not the fairy tale a person might expect. Adrian had won, and Elena had won, and the man who had haunted them both was in a cell awaiting a trial that would keep him there until he died. But winning a war does not undo the years that led to it, and there were things between Adrian and Elena that a single dramatic night could not erase. She still woke sometimes in the dark and remembered that this had all begun with a man dropping a black folder on her mother's kitchen table. She still had mornings where she looked at the enormous house around her and felt the old anger rise up, the anger of a woman whose choice had been stolen. And on those mornings she was cold to him, and he let her be cold because he had promised her a long time ago that he could handle being hated, and he had meant it. What she did not expect was that the hardest part would be watching him try. Because Adrian Valenti did not know how to be loved. He knew how to protect, how to provide, how to anticipate a need before it was spoken. Those things he had taught himself over 4 years of loving her from a distance. But the ordinary business of simply being with another person, of sitting across a table, and having nothing to fear of being touched with affection instead of calculation, was completely foreign to him, and Elena watched him fumble at it like a man who had been handed an instrument he had only ever seen in pictures. "You flinched," she said one morning weeks in. She had reached over at breakfast to brush a crumb from his collar, an unthinking gesture, the kind of thing married people did without a thought, and he had gone rigid under her hand. "I didn't mean to," he said. "I know you didn't. That's what breaks my heart." She left her hand on his collar. "When's the last time someone touched you without wanting something or without hurting you?" Adrian was quiet for a long moment. "I don't know," he said finally. "I genuinely don't know. I've tried to think of it and I can't find it." He looked at her hand as if it were a foreign object resting on his shoulder. "You. That afternoon. The flower. That's the closest I can come, and even that wasn't touching. You just handed me something." Elena's throat tightened. She thought about a little boy in this same house, a boy whose mother had died and whose father ruled through terror, a boy who had learned before he was 10 that to be touched meant to be struck, that to love meant to hand your enemies a knife. She thought about how many years that boy had gone without a single kind hand laid on him, and she understood in that moment that the man across the table was not cold at all. He had never been cold. He had been starving for so long that he had forgotten hunger was even a thing a person could feel. "Then we're going to fix that," she said. Slowly. "You're going to have to learn to be touched, and I'm going to have to learn to touch you without waiting for you to earn it." She squeezed his shoulder. "That's the deal. That's the marriage. We're both learning something we should have learned as children, and didn't." He put his hand over hers. It took him a visible effort, the deliberate act of a man teaching his own body a new language. "I don't deserve this," he said. "No," Elena agreed. "You don't. Neither did I deserve to have my choice taken from me. So we're even. Now stop flinching and eat your breakfast." And that, more than the wire and the confession and the night that ended Rena, was the real turning of the story. Not the defeat of a monster. The slow, patient, unglamorous work of 2 damaged people learning how to be gentle. The flower shop opened in the spring. It had been Adrian's idea, though he had offered it so carefully that it took Elena a while to realize how much it meant to him. He had not built it. He had not bought it and handed it to her the way he had handed her the greenhouse, because he had finally understood after everything that the greatest gift he had ever given her had also been a kind of cage. Another thing decided for her, another choice made in the dark, without asking. "So this time," he asked, "there's a corner shop for lease," he said one evening. "On a good street, big windows, a bell over the door." He did not look at her when he said it, as if afraid of wanting it too openly. "I remember you saying that once. That if you ever had your own shop, you'd want big windows and a bell over the door. I didn't buy it. I want to be clear about that. I didn't buy it and wrap it up and surprise you, because I've learned that's not a gift that's just me deciding your life again. I'm only telling you it exists. What you do with that is yours." Elena looked at him for a long time. "When did I say that?" she asked. "About the windows and the bell." Adrian hesitated. "That afternoon," he admitted. "The corner. 4 years ago. Before your customer called you away. You said it like it was a dream you'd given up on. You said someday, if I'm lucky, a little shop with big windows and a bell over the door so I know when someone needs me." His voice was quiet. "I've remembered it every day since. And there it was. The thing that undid her. The thing that finally cracked the last of the anger she had been holding like a stone in her chest. Not the money. Not the greenhouse. Not the power or the protection. It was that this man had carried one throwaway sentence from an ordinary afternoon for 4 years, had held it like something precious, had waited all this time not to buy her the dream, but to be allowed to help her build it herself. "Yes," she said, and her voice broke. "Yes, I want the shop, but you're going to help me, not with money, with your hands. You're going to paint the walls and haul the buckets and learn the names of the flowers, and when someone walks in, you're going to learn how to smile at them instead of frightening them. Because I'm not going to run a shop married to a man the neighborhood is scared of. You want to be part of my life, then you're going to become someone people aren't afraid of. That's the price. That's what it costs." Adrian, who had built an empire on fear, who had spent his whole life making sure people were afraid of him because fear was the only wall that had ever kept him safe, looked at his wife and understood that she was asking him to tear down the last wall he had. "All right," he said. "Teach me." He was terrible at it at first. He did not know how to make small talk. He did not know how to laugh at a customer's joke, or ask about someone's grandchildren, or wrap a bouquet without looking like he was concealing a weapon. The neighborhood people came in wary, because everyone knew whose money had opened the shop, and the sight of Adrian Valenti behind the counter emptied the store faster than a fire alarm. But Elena was patient, and Adrian was underneath everything a man who had spent 4 years teaching himself to grow impossible flowers out of love for a woman who did not know he existed. He could learn anything if the reason was her. So he learned. He learned the names of the flowers and then the names of the people. He learned which old woman came in every Friday for a single rose to put on her husband's grave. And he learned to have it ready before she asked and to refuse her money quietly, the way a florist had once refused his. He learned that the boy from the building across the street had no money, but loved to watch the water run through the flower buckets, and Adrian let him watch and then let him help, and then one day paid him a small wage to sweep the floor, and the boy's mother wept in the doorway because no one had ever given her son a chance at anything. The neighborhood stopped being afraid of Adrian Valenti somewhere in that first summer. They did not know his history, most of them, and the ones who did watched a hard man become gentle in real time and decided the way neighborhoods do that a man was what he did in front of you and not what they said about him. He became of all the impossible things well liked. Children waved at him. Old men argued with him about baseball. And Elena watched it happen from behind the counter of her shop, the shop with the big windows and the bell over the door, and she thought that she had gotten her dream after all, just not in any shape she could have imagined. Her parents came around slowly. Giovanni Moretti had never forgiven himself for the debt that started all of it, and he had never quite forgiven Adrian for the way he had used it. And for a long time, the two men could not be in a room together without the air going tight. Rosa was worse. She had told her daughter to run, had promised to hide her, had spent months believing Adrian was the monster who had bought her only child, and a mother's fear does not dissolve because a story ends well. The thaw came when it came from an unexpected direction. It was Rosa's birthday, and Elena had insisted the family gather at the house, and the evening had been stiff and painful. Everyone performing politeness over a meal no one enjoyed. And then, near the end, Rosa had gone looking for the bathroom and gotten lost in the enormous house, and she had turned a corner. She had never turned and opened a door. She had never opened, and found herself standing in the greenhouse. She stood there a long time. Then she came back to the table, and she was pale, and she looked at Adrian in a way she never had before. "You built that," she said. It was not a question. "Yes," Adrian said. "For her. Before she ever loved you. Before she even stopped hating you." "Yes." Rosa was quiet. And then she said the thing that changed everything between them. The thing that let her finally set down the fear she had carried since the night he came to her kitchen. "My husband borrowed money to save his family," she said slowly. "He did a foolish, dangerous thing, and it nearly destroyed us, and he did it out of love. I have spent a year being angry at you for using that against us." She looked at the doorway that led to the greenhouse. "But a man who builds a room full of flowers in the dark for a woman who despises him is not a man who used my daughter. He is a man who loved her so badly and so wrongly that he did not know any other way to say it than the only language his terrible life ever taught him." Her voice wavered. "I know something about being married to a man who does foolish, dangerous things out of love. I have been married to one for 35 years. She reached across the table, and she took Adrian's hand the first time she had ever willingly touched him. "You are forgiven. Not because what you did was right, because I understand now why you did it, and because my daughter is happy, and it turns out you are the reason, and a mother cannot stay angry at the reason her child is happy. It is not possible. I have tried." Adrian, who had not cried in front of anyone but Elena in his entire adult life, had to look away from the table for a moment. And when he looked back, Giovanni Moretti was watching him, and something had shifted in the old man's face too. Some final knot coming loose. And Giovanni raised his glass just slightly, an old man's small gesture of peace. "To love that doesn't know how to talk," Giovanni said quietly. "May it learn." And they drank to it, all of them, the whole broken and mended family in the house, where a lonely man had once believed he would live and die alone. The trial came and went. Rena was convicted on the strength of his own words, the confession Elena had drawn out of him with nothing but nerve and a wire, and he was sentenced to spend the rest of his life exactly where Elena had told him she hoped he'd end up. She did not attend the sentencing. She had a shop to run and a Friday rose to have ready for a widow, and she decided that giving Salvatore Rena any more of her time than she already had was a gift he did not deserve. Adrian finished what he had started years before. He dismantled the last of it, the whole dark machinery of the family business piece by piece, and where he could, he did it in the open now, working with the same agent who had once handed Elena a card in a moment of danger. It cost him. It cost him money, and old alliances, and the fear that had kept him safe his whole life. But he was not trying to be safe anymore. He was trying to be free, which was a different thing entirely, and it turned out to be the only thing worth the trouble. Elena's foundation grew out of the shop almost by accident. It started with the boy who swept the floor, and then it was 3 boys, and then it was a program, and then it was a real thing with a name providing work and training, and a first chance to families in the neighborhoods that had produced men like Rena and might, without someone reaching in, produce 100 more. Adrian funded it, and Elena ran it, and between them, they took the money that had been built on fear and turned it slowly into something that looked a great deal like hope. "Do you know what the strange thing is?" Elena said to him one evening near the end of the first year as they closed the shop together. "The strange thing is that you were right. That night on the phone, the first night when I told you I'd never love you. You said you understood, and I thought you were just being cold. But you weren't. You understood because you already knew something I didn't." "What's that?" Adrian said. "That the person who seems the coldest is sometimes the one who's been loving the hardest the whole time in silence, where no one could see it, and use it against them." She turned off the last of the lights. "You told me the day I moved in that I'd understand eventually, and that when I did, I'd be angry with you all over again for a different reason. I never asked you what you meant. Do you remember saying that?" "I remember." "What did you mean?" Adrian was quiet for a moment. "I meant," he said, "that eventually you'd understand I'd loved you for 4 years, and you'd be angry all over again. Not because I trapped you, but because I wasted all that time. Because I stood in the shadows for 4 years, being a coward watching you loving you, and never once had the courage to simply walk up to you in daylight and say a single honest word. I meant you'd be angry that we could have had all those years, and I threw them away out of fear. And by the time I found the courage to reach for you, the only way I knew how to do it was the wrong way, the way that hurt you." He looked at her. "Were you angry about that?" Elena thought about it honestly, the way she thought about everything. "Yes," she said. "For a while. I was furious about it. All those years you watched me and said nothing. The ordinary version of us that never got to happen. The one where you were just a sad man who came into my shop, and I got to know you slowly, and fell in love with you the normal way, without any of this." She took his hand. "I mourned that version of us. The one we didn't get. I'm sorry," Adrian said. "For all of it. I've never stopped being sorry. I know." She pulled him toward the door. "But here's what I've decided, and I've thought about it a long time, so listen. That ordinary version of us, the sad man in the flower shop, the slow, easy love. It sounds beautiful, but it isn't real. It never existed. It was never possible because the man who could have loved me the easy way was never going to walk into my shop and say a single word. That man was too broken, too afraid, too buried under everything your father did to you. The easy version of us was a fantasy. It was never on the table." She stopped in the doorway under the bell and turned to face him. "The only version of us that was ever actually possible is this one, the wrong one. The one that started with a debt and a threat and a locked room. Because it took all of that, every ugly piece of it, to drag you out of the shadows and force you to reach for me. You never would have done it any other way. You told me so yourself. You said you'd have cleared the debt and vanished and let me live my life clean. That's what the courageous, decent version of you would have done." Her eyes filled. "And I'd have lived a whole ordinary life, and died an old woman, and I never ever would have known that somewhere in this city there was a man who kept a flower alive for 4 years because I laughed once about loving something I could never have." Adrian could not speak. "So no," Elena said. "I'm not angry anymore. Not about the time we lost. Because the truth is we never lost it. We never had it to lose. There was only ever one road that led to you actually being brave enough to love me out loud, and it was this one, and it was terrible, and I would walk it again. Every step. The folder on my mother's table. The locked door. The night with the wire. All of it. Because all of it is what it cost to get here to this door with this bell with you." She reached up and touched his face. The coldest man in the city. Who was never cold at all, who was just waiting in the dark for someone to hand him a flower and tell him everything is usually better than it looks. Adrian Valenti pulled his wife into his arms in the doorway of the little flower shop with the big windows and the bell over the door, and he held her the way he had learned to hold her over a year of practice, without flinching, without calculation, without fear. And he understood at last the thing it had taken his whole life and hers to teach him. That he had spent 30 years believing love was a weakness the world would find and use to destroy him. That his father had beaten that lesson into him before he could even read. That he had built an empire on it, and lost his only friend to it, and nearly lost the only woman he ever loved to it. And that it had been a lie from the very beginning, because love had not been his weakness. Love had been the only strength that ever saved him. It had walked into a room full of killers wearing a wire. It had drawn a confession out of a monster with nothing but nerve. It had taken a man born to be alone and cruel and afraid, and it had made him against every odd, against his own father, against the whole weight of his terrible life, into a man that children waved at on the street. She had told him 4 years ago on a cold afternoon that everything is usually better than it looks. She had been right. She had been right about the flowers. And she had been right about him, and she had been right about the whole broken world, which had looked for so long like nothing but a trap, and had turned out to be capable of this. Of a shop with a bell, of a mother's forgiveness, of a boy sweeping a floor, of 2 damaged people learning slowly how to be gentle, of a love that began in the dark and stepped at last into the light. And standing there, holding her, Adrian Valenti finally believed what he had spent 4 silent years too afraid to say out loud, that the man everyone called heartless had a heart. After all, that it had belonged to her from the very first day, and that some loves are not weakened by silence, but forged in it, waiting patient and unbreakable. For the moment, they are finally brave enough to speak.